We're being hit from all sides and people are starting to take notice. We'll talk about it. The dominoes are starting to fall. The die's been cast. All of the jigsaw pieces are starting to form the picture. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, then apparently you have a life and you don't spend a whole lot of time on YouTube like I do, or reading articles. Welcome to the Opinionated Prepper. I'm Steve. I spent the day, the better part of the day, after my chores were done, just going through and looking at this and that and the other thing with articles and the top trending things of the day and all of that. And it all seems to kind of be pointing to a place, and I'll reveal what I think that place is at the end. So if you're curious and knowing what's going on, I'll try to make this short so I don't take up your time. But do me a favor, if you like it being short, like, share, subscribe. You know, maybe I can edify you and give a little bit of information, or give you a recap so you're not wasting your day like I did. You know, but it started out last night, and I liked this article. I liked it a lot. It gave me a whole lot of patriotic pride that there's a right-wing sheriff's group that's taking on the Fed. You know, and I like that. It piqued my interest, and I started reading it. And at a sheriff and law officers convention, you know, the sheriff was saying during an intermission, you know, that sheriffs are supposed to be there to combat evil, and they're supposed to be there to stop evil governments. And I like that. I do. I support that 100%. But then I went and looked at who wrote the article, and it was the Associated Press. That struck me as odd, because generally, for the last few years at least, when AP does anything with a conservative tone or a grassroots tone, where it's talking about, you know, fighting the man, more or less, they put a very liberal spin on it, and they associate that person with right-leaning tendencies and this and that and the other. But there was no spin. There was no opinion. It wasn't an op-ed. It was completely unbiased, which is not like Associated Press. And it just got me wondering, why would it bring that up? And then I start thinking about what started the grassroots movement and the right, or conservatives, even libertarians, climb back to the top, if you will, with Roe versus Wade, and with the anti-abortion laws going around, and with all of the issues of the left being shot down that they worked so hard over the years to get put into place. You know, that started last summer, and it seemed like we were starting to fight back, and then it kind of dwindled off a little bit. And then you have Jason Aldean and his anthem, which was short-lived, you know, and CMT was pulling the video, and everybody was saying, oh, because this took place in this video, and blah, don't pay attention to it. So what happens? A no-name grassroots Virginia worker, you know, that's same blue-collar boy like us, that goes through the same problems, had the same struggles in life, you know, everything like that, comes out with a nice simple song that has such a powerful message that it seems to unite the country again, and it's gone viral. It makes me think, is it for such a time as this? You know, I'm glad we're starting to stand up, but they're allowing us to stand up without much of a fight. You think about Kavanaugh. You think about all of the protests, all of the marches, all of the everything that was accumulated by mostly the left, pounding on the courthouse doors, you know, whenever Kavanaugh was being put in, yelling and screaming, burning Trump in effigy, you know, saying really outlandish stuff that should have landed them in jail, but it didn't. But they were fighting and fighting, and their voices were heard. And now it seems like for the last year, we're fighting, and we're doing it in more of a modest sense, but we're standing up for what we believe, and we're starting to fight back to get things balanced and to get our rights back. And you're not hearing anything really from the left. You're not hearing the protests, you're not hearing the outrage, you're not hearing the demand for equal rights, you're not hearing about any of that stuff. They're just saying, oh shucks, you got us. That doesn't sound like them from what we've seen from them for the past few years. So it's almost like they're allowing this to happen. And why would they do that? Because they want it to happen. You have things that are covered up in Maui. Terrible, terrible. I watched a man who gave a nice YouTube presentation on it, and I'll put the link down in the description, and that's going to be all that I put down in the description, other than a description of my video. But this is so in depth, and it brings up so many things that are just outrageous that it kind of needs to be focused on. So it's not going to be lost in the mix. There's going to be emphasis on that. And I really highly suggest, if you thought anything was suspicious about those fires, I don't think you've heard the half of it. This man has gone into quite a bit, and I'm not going to summarize, I'm not going to ruin his in-depth reporting. I'm not going to articulate, I'm not going to anything. I'm not going to usurp his message or try to copycat. This is something that you just need to watch for yourself. Just take my word for it and watch it. But you have that, and the only thing I'm going to say is there's a lot of rumors about a 15-minute smart city that people like myself and people, I'm sure, like you, kind of have in the back of their heads saying, no, this is why they're doing it, this is why they're doing it. It might be. I don't think all of this is for that. I think it might be one of the end results. But you mix that with one of the big things coming into play. People are in fear of lockdowns and regulations and mandates coming back in, because is rearing its ugly head again. And though they might try that, it's not going to be anything. I mean, you think, how long was it from when you stopped hearing about it, or not even hearing about it? You heard about it, but then you'd hear, psh, who cares? And they'd go out and people were doing their own thing anyhow, regardless of what Big Brother was saying. And then months and months later, Biden says, we've lifted everything, you're free, hooray. And we just kind of looked and we said, really? You're still talking about that? We've been doing our own thing for months. So if they try to instill mandates and regulations again, it's not going to work well at all. No one is going to listen. I mean, I'm sure you have some of those uber left people, that will try and force their opinion, but you're going to have more of us that are saying, you can shove that opinion. People won't listen. They won't listen because, at least back then, and I'll make Trump the face of the booming economy, because he credits himself, and okay, sure, it's not for any other reasons, right? It was all Trump. But we had money in the savings account. We had good jobs. We were buying houses, buying cars. Because of these mandates, we lost it all. We have nothing. They're saying there's half a month left, 15, 16 days worth of reserves for the basic average American citizen, that all of our savings are now gone. For the last year, we've been seeing people maxing out their credit cards. And you have banks that are restricting the limits on credit, and they're not issuing new credit. So we don't have any savings to fall back on like we did. We don't have the good jobs that we were having, because most of the jobs didn't come back after the lockdowns. We don't have credit cards that we can fall back on, because if they're not maxed out by now, they're restricting limit and new lending and restricting giving new credit to people. So we don't have that. Where's it going to lead us if we have to start locking down again, and the jobs have to lock down, and we can't go anywhere or do anything? People aren't going to have it. They're not. They're already pushed to the limit. So where do they go? They join the grassroots movements of the people that have been here all along, like us, standing up, saying no more. That's getting a new breeze in our sails with rich men and with small town and with the sheriffs saying, nope, not in my backyard. They join us, and now it seems to be evened out. When you put that with the economy and what's happening in the economy, and I'm telling you, I'm not getting into it because, like I said, I'm not going to do another in-depth search, but just going on a few and researching bigger real estate firms that are going under, like Country Garden. They're 4 times the size of Evergrande. Who invested in all these people besides BlackRock and blah blah blah? Who are the investors that these real estate corporations are now looking for bankruptcy protection against, saying, no, you can't come and take what's ours? Who are they? They're JP Morgan Chase, they're Wells Fargo, they're Fidelity, they're Bank of America. They are investment banks. Where do they get their money from to invest? From us. They're investment corporations. And some retail investors may own stocks and everything, but the majority of these investment banks' money comes from 401ks, comes from retirement plans, comes from, all of these different hedge fund managers and money market funds and all of that makes up the shadow banking. And they don't have the value of the assets that they do have has tanked tremendously. Other banks that are more local and other investment companies are getting their assets out. And as I said yesterday, when it comes to foreign investors like US interests and everything like that, they go to get their money and there's no money to be had, which means they've lost all of your retirement. They've lost all of the stock. What's going to happen then? Stock market's going to crash and plummet. All right, you have people selling off treasuries, selling off the government bonds at a record rate, including the Federal Reserve. The US government may be buying those back, but they're buying back the bonds that have a 1% yield, a 1.5% yield, when they just raised the debt ceiling at a huge high yield, going from 0.75% to 6% now, more or less, and they're selling off that at 6%. So we may be buying the 1 or 2, but we're selling the 6, which means it's not decreasing our debt, it's not decreasing our interest and our monthly payments, because that's going up. We're not paying off anything. The stock markets are going to crash. The bond markets are crashing, which is driving interest rates up. If the national banks that make up the Fed start to crash, then the Fed is just going to give them an influx of money again. Well, what happens? Back then when they did it, there was at least assets. There was housing, there was everything else. Most of the houses in China, they don't exist. Most haven't been built yet. And the ones that have been built have been given away to other banks already, which means there's no new assets out there, which means the value of the few assets that are out there go astronomical, so none of us can afford it. An influx of more money to bail out these banks after we bail in and they steal our money. They get bailed out again, and that influx is going to cause huge inflation. on everyday products, let alone commodities. So we have that mixing with people just being sick and tired, mixing with people being afraid of lockdowns and mandates again. What happens when it all comes to a head? And I'm not making a prediction at all. I'm not. I don't do that stuff. I don't set a timeline. I may give a prediction and say, I think this is going to happen, but I don't do timelines. But in my opinion, since this is the opinionated prepper, I think we're going to be in a world of hurt until next year. And next summer, things are just going to knock the bottom out of it. It's just going to go to trash. By next summer, we're going to see some major hurt, and it's going to blow up. Well, why next summer, would you ask? Look at Trump. Look what's going on. He's being strengthened. When they're trying to get him off the ballot, just like Biden said, he won't be on the ballot. I'll make sure he's not on the ballot. They're trying to get him off the ballot now by trumping up charges. That's putting a wind in the sails of his supporters, and people are rallying behind him. He's not even doing the debates because he says, people know me. They know what my presidency was about. I don't need to do these debates. He's resting on his laurels, while he's still getting arrested time after time after time. You know, the dude's getting arrested, going to jail, and he's such an icon and an anti-hero that the more he gets persecuted, the more the people rally around him and they gather. So it's almost like he's unstoppable, and they're worried about that stuff. Well, what can be a good way to do it? If you have half or 3/4 of the nation that are mad as hell and just not going to take it anymore and wanting to put a stop to stuff, and they're protesting and they're not doing this and they're boycotting this and they're standing up for their rights, and then you have the other 25 to 50% of the nation who are loyal to lunacy to a fault, the uber douches that are ruining it for the rest of us, they're fighting back. There's riots in the streets and fires and plunder and this and that and the other thing, and people are just going head to head like in a scene from that Vikings TV show. You have that, what's going to happen, man? They're going to call in the National Guard, or they're going to put heavier restrictions to keep us dwarfed that are just going to make our voices even louder and our actions probably not so benign. What if they instill martial law? What if they put restrictions on everything? Internet shut down, blah blah blah. Mail shut down because post office workers aren't crazy enough to go into a war zone, or any of that junk. You can't go out to put your mail-in ballot in. You can't go out to vote. They suspend the vote. They've postponed and moved election day a couple of times. They've never suspended it. But look what Ukraine is doing right now. Due to martial law and blah blah blah, they're not going to have a vote. So is it hard to believe that the people that are funding Ukraine might instill the same plans? What if they do what they did to the convoys, to the truckers up in Canada, and they freeze our bank accounts, which doesn't have anything in it anyways, so good luck, IRS. But what if they do that? I mean, they buckled under pressure. Do you really think we will? Outcry is getting pretty outrageous because people can't get to their money because assets are frozen, or there's a glitch in the system, and 3 days of not having a check, because they don't give a flip. It's not them that's having to go without money and going hungry. But people are getting outraged for that, and they're finding loopholes in other ways. What happens when everybody just says enough? I don't think they want a true crumbling of the country. I think they want the country to be more secure in their hands, so they're going to crumble the country on face value just so they can instill more power. But I'm going to put that link in the description. Like I said, I can't say enough about it. Very informative. It'll get you pretty mad looking at it. It'll get you kind of upset. the powers that be and why they're doing this and let it happen. Make you scratch your head and wonder if those conspiracy theories were right. And one thing I will give a sneak peek on that got me wondering was they have a little segment in there about where are the children, because they're not reporting on all of the missing children that's shown up from Hawaii. They're not reporting on half of the missing people, but they're not saying anything about children. And that could be one thing because, they're not doing this, they're not doing this, they're not letting this in. They don't want a huge influx and outcry. But, maybe it goes back to the Sound of Freedom and what that was about. Maybe it's a good way to think the demise happened of a whole bunch of kids, but the kids just disappeared into thin air. But I don't know, I'll let you be the judge of it. I appreciate you listening, I appreciate you stopping by. Once again, if you would, I'd appreciate it. Like, share, subscribe. Leave me a few comments. If you need my email address, go back to one of my other videos. Don't even have to watch it, just look in the description. You can see my email address, you can see where I am. I'm going to give that a break for a little while. So, God willing, we'll see you tomorrow.